Hello everyone, this is In-Game Art with another boxing of the offline product game review. This is Castlevania, the Anniversary Collection for the PlayStation 4, but being played and tested on my PlayStation 5. To jump right into it, this physical copy here comes with the update version 1.01 run on the disc, and I'm happy to say that there were no updates available since the time of this video. Now, like always, I play all my games completely offline with an unregistered account, and I can't say my experience was flawless, but the overall experience was nearly flawless, and I had a great time playing every single Castlevania game. I beat every single one of them, and I generally had a pretty good time. And as well, I was still unlocking trophies with my unregistered account. Now, before we go into it, I do want to point out that this physical copy was distributed by Limited Run Games, so getting a copy may not be the easiest in the future. So just keep that in mind that this is a limited run physical copy, and that's probably why it's more up to date. As well as that this PS4 version here also comes with the Japan versions of the Castlevania games on the disc as well. So that's really nice to see. I don't really know if there's any alterations from the Japan versions and the American or European versions of any of these Castlevania games, so I can't really give any insight on that part. But overall, I played the English ones. They were the American versions, and little to no problems. They all supported English. They even included a new game, Kid Dracula, which originally never had an English version before, and this was the first time ever distributed it into the US, so it was really cool to see that game included, and I relatively did enjoy Kid Dracula. Now, sadly, though, this does not include every classic Castlevania. There are still a few missing that I'm a little disappointed that are not part of this collection, because, of course, this is just a small, old game. It could clearly fit more of those classic games on there. So not everything of the classic Castlevanias is on disc, but a good portion of them. And I'm thankful they did go for a little bit of extra mile with the Kid Dracula one. But now, this is not the first time I've ever played Castlevania games. I've played a few of them, like the first Castlevania and Bahamut's Quest, but this was the first time I've ever sat down and played all of them in one go and beat every single one of them. Now, in terms of problems I had with the game, I did have the game lock up once on me, and that was when I was playing the first Castlevania. Now, I do want to point out, these are emulations of the original games. This is not like enhanced versions or anything like that. So they're strictly based on the emulations of the original, like, NES. So they experiences all the same bugs and problems and slowdowns and graphical issues when they first came out back in when they released. So don't think any, like, bug fixes or enhancement or boost mode or anything like that to address the slowdown and frame rate issues, as well as the graphics being choppy and flickering, and of course other issues that were bugs and crashes in the game. So the only reason I think the game locked up on that one time on me was because it was a legitimate lockup from when the game first came out. It was still a present bug in the game, where I jumped across this ledge and this bird that was carrying some flea monster hit me in midair, and since I think there was a bunch of animations that happened at once, the game locked up. That was the only time that ever happened. I never had any other lockups throughout all the other Castlevanias. As well as that there was some significant slowdown in the game. Now, this affects all the Castlevanias. It depends on how many assets and sprites and what's going on in the game, but all of them experience some form of slowdown. Some worse than others, and some fairly not as often. But for the most part, do expect slowdown, and of course, choppy graphics, flickering graphics, and assets and stuff like that. So if that's going to bug you, just keep that in mind. As well as that, though the game does support save state, so if you, for a difficult game like this, I won't deny I did abuse save state. It's almost required in certain games just to be able to make some decent progress, but you can only have one save state per game, so you can't like have multiple as a backup in case something happens or anything like that. So be very mindful of that. So if you save state in a bad area, that's the only save state you have, so just be very careful where you choose to save your state. As well as that this does not include any rewind feature that a lot of these older remastered versions of games are getting. So there's no way to like rewind the clock and stuff like that, or rewind an action that you just did. So just keep that in mind. And that's about it. There was nothing really other issue. The only issues is course, about the games. And I really didn't have any issues with the games. I thought they all were very interesting. Of course, some were better than others. I think we all can agree that probably the worst of the lot is probably Simon's Quest. Castlevania's Simon's Quest. And it's not really a bad game. It's very innovative and very ambitious what they were trying to do with that game. It's just, it has issues. Translation issues, as well as direction and getting lost and a lot of waste of your time and stuff like that. But for what they were trying to do with Simon's Quest, it was pretty impressive for its time point. But all the other games worked pretty good. I even enjoyed some of the Game Boy ones, which was really surprising. I was really worried about how that experience was going to be. I think overall, in terms of my enjoyment, I think the ones I didn't really like the most was mostly the first Game Boy game, Castlevania Adventures. That wasn't very good. Castlevania, or Super Castlevania 4 was probably not very good either. It's not necessarily bad, it's just, I don't know, something about the game just didn't really feel as impactful as the other Castlevanias, as well as Castlevania Bloodlines, or Vampire Hunters. Forget it. I think it's like both the names, but that one didn't really interest me. I really like the older ones, like I like Castlevania. I like Castlevania's Dracula's Curse. I even like Balmont's Revenge. All were very good and fun. Of course, I do admit, I abuse the heck out of save state. I'm not very good at Castlevania games. I don't have them memorized. I don't know all the bells and whistles and the tricks to get through the game. As I said, for a lot of these were my first time playing that version of Castlevania. I mean, I'm sure I played some version a long time ago, but it's been years, decades even, since I played a Castlevania game. But I still enjoyed it. Sure, I abused the save state. I didn't play the game authentically as much as I probably should have been, but what matters is that I had fun, and I did have fun for what was here. They're just disappointing when you realize there are other Castlevania games that are not included in this classic collection that could have been here. And there's nothing real else I can add about it. It's a good collection if you're a big fan of these retro games, you're a big fan of Castlevania, this is definitely should be right up your alley. Now keep in mind, these are all the vintage Castlevania versions of the games. If you're a big fan of Castlevania based on the Metrovania versions, like Symphony of the Night and so forth, you won't find a single one of those kinds of Castlevanias in this collection. I'm just keeping that in mind. Some people get a little sensitive on this topic because some people really love the classic Castlevanias and not a big fan of the newer versions, like the turning them all into Metrovanias. But I do agree that the biggest lore of Castlevanias has become the Metrovania versions of the game. To me, I enjoyed this game. These games, they were fun. They were the first time for me to play it. The music was really good, especially in Simon's Quest. Surprisingly, it has a really good soundtrack for that time point on Simon's Quest. But they all had some decently good soundtrack. I think out of all of them, of course, the Game Boy ones were a little bit limited, so I'm going to put those to the side because it's on the Game Boy. But I think out of all of them, I think Super Castlevania 4 was probably, in terms of my opinion, the weakest in the soundtracks. All the other ones had some fairly decent, good soundtrack. Even Kid Dracula. I was really surprised how much I enjoyed Kid Dracula. Some had argued that it's not a Castlevania game, which really it's not. It's more like a Mega Man Mario style game, but it just makes some few nods and Easter eggs about Castlevania in some way. I get it, but it's still cool that it's been brought over to the US and it's got even on a physical copy. It's not digitally only. So I thought that was really cool. It was just, there were certain moments the difficulty spikes can be a little frustrating. This is why I highly recommend just save stating. And I know that's abusive and everything like that, but trust me, when these older games, they weren't designed to be hard because it's fair. They designed it hard so that game to make the game last longer, because back then you rented games. So a lot of philosophy was to make the game hard at a certain moment or make it confusing at certain moments. That way it prevented you from immediately beating the game, to encourage you to rent the game again or to buy the game. That encourages sales. So it was just a policy they even did back then. Now you could even see even previous games with the same policies of design aspects, where games back then had the idea of time limits. Of course, this is a game console. Why would you put a time limit on the game? Some of them don't even have really any impact to the game. There's just time limit for the sake of time limit, because back in the day, back in arcade cabinets, all games had time limits. Even though back then it made sense, because on an arcade cabinet, you wanted to prevent somebody just leaving the game on and not completing their run. But on console play, of course, there's none of that. So it's just very interesting in that area, and you can see some of the overall the growth and the growing pains of gaming. But overall, the sprite graphics, even the older ones like Castlevania's Dracula's Curse, and even some of the innovative ideas they did with Simon's Quest, like a night and day system, and the progression of quests and everything like that. It's all very cool, and if you're like me who loves video games and loves to see the lore and history of games, sure, I will admit I am enjoying modern gaming more than retro gaming. But that doesn't mean I'm not a retro gamer. I love retro gamings. I love these like collections that have some fixes and tweaks to the game to make it a lot more approachable. Like I said, save states, and wish the game had like a rewind and stuff like that, or then graphical stuff. You can make it widescreen support and everything. I love that stuff, and I'm really happy that this collection has a lot of these features to make the experience a lot more better. And as well as it comes with the Japan versions, like I said, it's a little disappointing it doesn't come with all the classic Castlevania games, as this collection could clearly fit way more in this collection. But I'm just hoping that we'll get another collection, like Castlevania Classic Collections 2. I just want to see all these games get a new print run. Even though they're widely available in certain degrees like immolation and everything like that, I still would like to see new print runs. So like always, I will try to leave links down in the description if you're interested to copy. As I said, there was little to no problems. It worked just fine on my PlayStation 5. The only issues you're going to experience is the actual flaws of the game back when it was played on the NES. The other issue is that this is a limited run physical copy, so getting a copy will not be the easiest down the road. There is a Nintendo Switch version. I don't know how that version is and how the experience is. I can only speak for the PS4 version being played on my PS5. And I had little to no issues. I beat all of them and I did enjoy it. And I can recommend it if you're a fan of Castlevania collecting games, or if you're very interested in getting a new collection like this on your physical shelf. So thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next unboxing video. Bye-bye!